All right, guys, thanks so much for listening to another episode of the CX Chronicles podcast. I'm your host, Adrian Brady Shazana. We have an awesome guest today, Mikhail Hutton. Mikhail, welcome to the CX Chronicles podcast, my friend.
Thank you very much. Appreciate
So,
it.
guys, number one, Mikhail's got like a bunch of different awesome experience that he's kind of been through over the last 10, 15 years. Not only did he cut his chops early on working at some really big companies, thinking about all of the different intricacies of customer experience, customer success, analytics, bringing companies to market, thinking about how you could push your sales forward. But then he's also done a bunch of really, really cool leadership positions and CEO roles, CXO roles. So anyway, Mikhail, I'm going to stop right there. I'm going to let you tell your own damn story. But Mikhail, why don't you start off today's episode number one? Love to spend 5 minutes, man, on just the stepping stones. Give the audience, give the CX Nation a little bit of a taste for some of the work that you've been doing, and really kind of what got you into this whole space, man. What made you really
Yeah,
kind of realize you wanted to be a customer focused business leader?
that is a great question. I appreciate it. Let's see. I actually started out my career in insurance like many, many years ago. Not too many, but worked at Humana Insurance for a few years, doing what they at the time called senior products. And it was like field marketing. So I was going out selling Medicare, Medicaid products, um, insurance for those of us who were not us, but those of you who were like 60 something and about to enter retirement age listing, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But basically, Medicare, Medicaid has what's known as a supplemental plan. Folks get the option of either having private industry administer all their insurance or relying on the government, regardless of how you feel on both sides of the ball. They make it available, which is really awesome. So started out there, very quickly realized that I I don't want to do this forever. I like having insurance. I don't really care to sell it too much. I know
Yeah.
some people love it. I was not one of them. Super important here in the States. So ended up actually going to a bank called Bank Atlantic in South Florida. I was working there on the marketing team for a little bit, and the bank actually got acquired by BB&T. So if you don't know who Bank Atlantic is, that's because they got acquired roughly 12 years ago now.
Okay.
Um, in BB&T, the options basically were to try to find another job in South Florida or to move someplace else. I decided I like someplace else. Ended up getting hired here in New York City and was working, taking my sales and marketing background. I was working at Omnicom Media Group for like a year plus. It was my first like super large corporate job, and I was responsible for just assessing all of the different technology vendors that Omnicom can work with, who can do video advertising or this thing called dynamic advertising really well, who can just serve ads to people and do it consistently, who's great at reporting. Went through all that information. There was a vendor that I was working with there that was a startup that I really liked. I honestly fell into customer success. They needed someone on their CS team or their client services team back then,
Okay.
called Integral Ad Science. Integral, it was at the beginning, it was known as a brand safety company. They
Okay.
focused on making sure that ads were being served in the appropriate environments. They ended up layering things like fraud. So, is it a real person? Is it a bot? Viewability, all these different metrics into a suite of products. Was there when they had probably about 50 employees, and I was one of a handful of CS employees in the States. They had just opened, I think, in the UK when I started working there, and we had no systems.
Okay.
We had a few systems, but like no real idea of like what we needed to do beyond just making sure the customer's happy. The number one
Yep.
goal was like just give them what they need on schedule, make sure they're happy. And then over time, as we scaled, we realized like we can't just over service the wrong people forever, the wrong accounts. If they're really
Right.
small,
Right.
we're putting in 10 hours, that makes no sense. I was there for 3.5, almost 4 years. Did the journey from about 15 headcount to I think it was like 450 when I
Wow.
left.
Nice.
And
Nice.
they had, I believe, just hit $100 million run rate at my
Okay.
last year. Really awesome. So a really awesome experience in terms of scaling a CS team, putting in the systems. As one of the first supervisors or managers for the CS team there. So I ended up having a hand in a lot of the initial policy rollout, figuring out customer health, all things that later I feel like there was software for.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
But
I mean,
I
and
learned
Mikhail,
like,
let me just on that front
yeah,
right now for our listeners, man. You're right. I'm glad you're calling this piece out. When you have the opportunity or the luxury or whatever you want to call it, the fortune of having an experience where you're part of a company that goes from the infancy state to
yeah,
100 million in run rate, and you've got overnight you watch hundreds, if not 1,000, people come around. That shit's wild, man. So number one,
It's
it's a
crazy.
career accelerator, right? Like
Yeah,
you're exposed to things that there's no way you would ever seen if you weren't a part of. I hate this term too, but like being on a rocket ship company like that does that so fast, dude. It's a game changer for the career.
100%. Yeah, and it's funny because like you'd realize how many people want to be part of that journey. I would hire people and say, look, we are a 10-year-old and a 30-year-old suit, just showing like how undersized you are in terms of headcount and team size.
Yep.
And how happy they would need to be. I'd explain like this isn't like a boiler room. You need to go work 20 hours a day, but
Yeah.
just know that like you kind of have no life for a little bit, and we're hiring you so that we can give the team breathing room and just make it a healthier, better environment. Uh,
100%.
was awesome. So yeah, so at IIS had a really great time. They eventually got acquired in 2018. I went to had another kind of short stint at a larger company called Quadcast. What was great about making that shift from Integral to Quadcast, they were roughly double in size by all metrics. They did a little bit more in revenue at that time too. But it was my first time seeing, okay, like for where IS is going, here's the type of leader that I need to be.
Yep.
They were very metrics driven. They had systems in place. A lot of it I had to focus on there was basically like team. When I say team management, I mean like personal development, upskilling the team, making sure that they're resourced properly. It
Yep.
was the first time I really had to like fight for budget or time to do something, which
Yep.
was good. And it also showed me some of the challenges of just making sure that the entire commercial team, so the sellers, the account managers, the ops, like the technical ops folks, that there was good alignment there.
Yep.
Uh, yeah, and after that, it was that's where I kind of left ad tech afterwards and said I want to go work on something else. I want to focus more on climate. So I left to take a VP of marketing and CS role at an ag tech startup called Artemis. I was there for a little over 2 years. Then COVID hit. And then during COVID, I ended up running two separate companies as CEO. One of them got acquired. The other one we shut down last year, unfortunately. But all really great experiences. It helped me to see full picture when you've got to think through budget and you balance that between here's what the customer needs and product wise here's how we need to service them. I think
Yep.
even in the world of automation, service, especially some level of managed service, is a huge differentiator. It's really frustrating given my background in CS um, to just see when the ball's dropped when it comes to just delighting people because
Totally
it's
agree.
not super difficult.
Yeah.
It just takes a little intentionality and a little bit of going slower than I think society wants you to go today. But you still have to have that trade off and still really think through how do we create a really great experience for folks and also build a really great business at the same time so that we're all here and we're all happy.
Yep. I love it,
That's
man.
been my journey.
I love it, man. So number one, thank you so much for sharing that. Number two, I just think like this is why I was pumped for today, guys, is Mikhail has seen a bunch of different businesses at a bunch of different stages in a bunch of different industries with a bunch of different awesome people and customers. And I think obviously you guys know me well, man. Like I just think that is one of the greatest fortunes as a customer focused business leader is really like a superpower can become by being in all these different businesses and seeing all these different ways that it can be done or that it wasn't done, frankly, because you still learn
Yeah,
so much from some of the losses and some of the things that just didn't happen really well. But that's how I was pumped to get into it. I'd love to kind of jump into the first pillar of team, man. Like let's talk about team for a couple minutes. I'd love like
yeah,
across all these different businesses, and then let's think about. I'd love for you to kind of think about even over these last couple of years because you had the luxury of being a CEO of two different businesses, two different organizations, doing two wildly different things. But love to just pick your brain on team for a couple minutes, Mikhail. Like,
yeah.
what if there's like two or three big areas that you really kind of were able to sort of add to your personal playbook over these last several years of leading businesses and really having to deal with just the pressure and the constant pressure, I should say, of having to just be responsible for frankly everything in the CEO role. I'd love to kind of hear some of the biggest takeaways or the biggest like golden nuggets or the biggest CTAs that you'd like leave with our listeners around some of the things that you found really easy or some of the things you found really difficult when it came to team building, team retention, and just finding incredible talent out there in this market that's been frankly it's been wild the last couple of years, right? Like there's all these different roles, there's all these people looking for new roles, there's a lot of just departure, if you will, of people leaving companies that they've been at for years to go find something different, and probably COVID being the catalyst. But I'd love for you to spend just a couple minutes talking about team.
For sure. Yeah, I'd say if I had to pick top three, um, Yeah, I think I'd probably start with uh you just can't you have to want it less than the other person wants it, whatever that role might be. Whenever I look to hire someone, I try to think about like if the motivation for them, especially if I'm hiring someone in a stretch role, if the motivation for them is lower than my motivation for them in a particular role. So, for example, if I'm hiring a head of sales, if I'm hiring a head of CS, and it's someone that maybe they haven't led a team before, or maybe they have, but it's like a larger, there's a huge difference between super corporate and 10-person startup, and making that adjustment down is not something that everyone's up for.
Yep.
A lot
Great
of it for
point.
me is understanding like, hey, what's this person's motivation to do the role, and are they more excited about the role and this business than I am about them? Because what I tend to find is that I am generally I'm like a realistic optimist. I like to say eyes wide open yet still dreaming. And the problem with that is I'll sometimes look at someone and say, I think this person can do this role and really believe in them, but
Yep.
that belief has to be internal. And so I can't get them to where I see them going faster than they're willing to take that step and build that belief.
Yeah.
And times where I get myself in trouble with setting up the team dynamics, it's usually when I'm in one of those scenarios where I'm like I'm either holding on to someone longer than I should, or I'm not moving someone fast enough because of maybe like I don't see something they see. But it's got to be a situation where their motivation for them is stronger than mine, which is unfortunately not that common, especially over the last few years. I think folks in terms of confidence have taken a huge hit. There's just a lot more stress around right now. There's
Yeah.
like I don't know if we can call this a down market, what kind of market we call it,
I know
COVID,
it's the thing.
post-COVID
It's a
market.
confusing market.
It's very
Every day it's
confusing.
different signals from the market, man.
100%. And that really messes with your psyche.
Yeah.
So that's it, which actually be number two for me, I think would be really creating an environment where there's strong vision. I think vision in any company is pretty rare. And I don't mean like the founder hype it up or like sales kickoff where everyone's getting super excited and rah rah. I mean like true vision. And as I enter role, I remember working just like we were doing and I remember thinking, I feel like we could be the next Nielsen. And I never said it to anyone. It was just like an insight of like, I see where the industry is going. I see what marketing and marketing analytics is doing. And I really feel like we could be the next Nielsen and just left it alone. A few weeks later, our CEO, we're at an all company meeting, and he says the exact same thing. And he gave some metrics showing here's where we are as a company. Here's where other SaaS companies at our stage, our level of funding, where they've been. And he just comes right out and said, like, I think we can go public. I think we could be the next Nielsen. And I was like, that, I want to do that. That's
Yeah.
exciting.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, again, like, it wasn't like a rah rah, like super hype, like, we're going to change the world.
Yep.
was a really grounded, hey, I'm looking at the ecosystem
Yep.
and I'm seeing what we're up to, and we've got this really exciting thing going on. And here's this big player, and I think we can eventually replace that player and do it really well. I'd say that's number two, and probably third is just getting the balance right. I think it's very easy, not just to get top heavy in terms of I have too many senior leaders, so like too many VPs, too many directors.
Yep.
That's also true of experience. So I found it super important to be able to be in a position though to do it, but to cycle new or less experienced people into the team as frequently as possible and having a good balance of I've been doing this for a while, I've got really strong experience versus I have fresh eyes. And it's not just about the fresh eyes, it's actually about being able to build an environment where you don't always have to look externally for quality talent. You can
Yep.
look internally, you can see what people bring to the board. You can, and I mean this like specific, not like don't go out and have 10 department leads or team leads be new in the role. What I mean is, if I'm running a sales org or CS org and I have room, that's like 5 or 6 people need to get hired. Two of those people need to be relatively new. It could be 2 to 4 years worth of experience in the market. And then they can step into a role where you just know, like, you maybe don't need to coach them as much. But if everyone's got 10, 15, 20 years of experience, that's good to a degree, but eventually those people want to move on.
Yeah,
And so
for
what you
sure.
need backstop it really well that
Yep.
can step into the role and the customer will not feel it. And
Yep.
the only way to do that well is if you've got a good balance of relatively new medium, and deep expertise, and then the same thing at the leadership level as well, to have that balance so that we've got folks that, man, someone just left, but the company, the team's going to be okay
Yep.
because we know who that next man or woman up is going to be.
Love it. I absolutely love it. A couple things that you just laid out for us, Mikhail, that I want to just hit on real quick. Number one,
Yeah.
your Nielsen example. Dude, we talk about this all the time on the show, but like one of the biggest things that so many like emerging companies or growth focused companies oftentimes miss is like making sure you're setting a really, really clear picture, mission, or general direction for where the hell the business is going, or how the how the founder or the CEO is positioning to the group of guys and gals that are showing up to the damn business every single solidarity day trying to make things happen, hard things happen. Like, what ocean are you in? What ship are you? Like, I always use the ship analogy. Just at least got to let them know what ocean you're in, what type of vessel you are, generally what direction are you going. Are you going to where it's cold? Or are you going to where it's warm? Like, my point is so many companies miss early on just having even a simplified vision that they can make it really clear to both customers and to employees where they think they're going. Now, you can always pitch and pivot. That's the whole beauty of business, and that's the whole beauty of being a great leader is listening to the market, hearing what works, hearing what, and then kind of iterating and moving your rudder accordingly. But there's a lot of companies out there that in between 0 and 10 million bucks, you ask them what their mission or their core values or their general direction is, and they've almost just been so maniacally focused on pitching and pivoting from day one that they don't know anymore. It's almost like a missing identity. And then those same companies oftentimes typically have cultural issues. They have EX issues. There's almost a revolving door of people coming and going because it's like, what do we do here? So I love your Nielsen example. Like, guys, listeners, pick your Nielsen example. Every one of us is building in a different space, a different business, a different product, a different service type. But like having some type of North Star, having just any type of general direction or bullseye, if you will, or potential bullseye or target, it makes things
Huge
simpler
deal.
and easier, right, for everybody. So I love that. Second thing was just like when you were talking about like today's market being different. I've been saying this more and more and more, Mikhail, on the show, but like, COVID really did change everything for every one of us. Whether you're 40 years in biz, 30 years in biz, 2 or 3 years in biz, and you just got out of school 1,000 days ago, we all kind of got put in the same type of world where like we're all figuring shit out every single day. We all have like this weird remote or hybrid type of thing where some days we're in the office, some days we're traveling to clients, some days we're doing stuff like what me and you are doing right now, right? Because it's Friday, we want to hang out with our families tonight. So we're like in our offices, but we're still getting work done. And like a lot of people, not every, it's still, I think some people are still catching up to this, Mikhail. They're still getting used to this new world and they're still figuring out how the hell to find their own version of themselves inside of it.
No, I mean, I agree with you. What was helpful for me is before COVID, and when I joined Artemis, I said, I don't want to go into the office every day. At that point, I'd been working roughly 10 years. I had seen that the team, like the world was already moving to a place where we're kind of flexible-ish.
Yeah.
So it was a
Yeah.
chance for me to test out before COVID. Is remote only what I want? Is COVID, not COVID, sorry, is hybrid more my thing? And where I landed was like, I love being in the office 2, 3 days a week. I love connecting with people, but I also love having a day or two where if I'm not traveling, I'm home and I'm just doing work there and no one's like knocking on the door. I can just
You
do
can
some
get work
focus
done.
work.
You literally can
Get
put
work
your head down and
done.
get work done.
Yeah, like trying to be nice, but if you're running a team, like there are times where you just really need to get some work done.
Yeah.
If you owe someone a report, you need to get that done. But also not dealing with a commute. It for me it was a 50-ish minute commute each way. So that's time I could just hang out, go a
Yeah.
little slow on Friday,
Yeah.
go a little slow on Monday or Tuesday, which was really awesome. And I think if I hadn't had that experience, I would probably be where some folks still are today because I think we're really only 2 years into getting used to life again,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We
Yeah.
have 2 years where everyone's like, just pause, don't do anything. And I think we're kind of on year two, and there's still that adjustment, and there's still a lot of noise out there as far as remote only, hybrid. No, everyone needs to come back into the office. And I think you like individually, people need to find their own flavor of what works for them and then go look for that opportunity. I don't necessarily think it's on the company to provide that for everyone. I think it's on you to say, I really like remote. There's a lot of remote only companies right now, awesome remote companies that you can join. I love hybrid, same thing. There are a lot of other companies, people are calling it old school. I'm like, not really, I disagree.
No. Yeah.
That just want to be in the office 5 days a week because they
Yeah.
love that collaboration. Man, you also don't know sometimes like especially here in the city, like I'm fortunate to have a 3 bedroom apartment, but you just don't know what kind of environment people are working in. If you've got young kids, if you have a really tight working space, if you and your spouse are also working and working from home and you're having a lot of meetings, there's a lot there. But also, if you don't want to be a fully digital, like working a fully digital company anymore, man, you've probably got to be in the office 5 days a week, and that's got to be something you expect, and you might love it,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. Some people do,
So,
man. Some people literally love it's your commute point for guys. I was joking with Mikhail on one of our last catch ups about like for me in New York City, like so it's been 6 years since I was in New York City for about 10 years, right?
yeah,
And I've been out of the city now for about 6 years, and part of one of the biggest reasons why I became such a podcast nerd, man, I had that. So I had several jobs where I was up on the Upper East Side and I had to get to Lower Manhattan, which two of those jobs required not only either a long subway ride all the way down and all the way up. One
yeah.
of the jobs required a crosstown bus from the Upper East to the Upper West, and then I had to hop on the Red
Oh
Line to jump all the way
man.
down. That was a 40 on a perfect day. It was 49 minutes. Many days in wonderful New York City, it was more like 55, just in an hour. And sorry, with my walks too, for like my walks to the subway and up and down and all that.
Yeah.
Dude, that's what gave me essentially 2 hours a day that I had to fill, and that's where podcasts came into my life, man. Where like it was like because I was doing the music thing and I was doing the Audible thing, and then like once I hit podcast and I realized, holy shit, I have an hour of learning on the way to work, and then I got an hour of decompression learning on the way home, and obviously I would fit different content types in those commutes,
Yeah.
but like that's how. But I hated it at the same time as much as I loved being
I
introduced.
love the
Or,
time, but no.
yeah, dude.
I'm with you yesterday and today this morning. So my wife is dropping our kids off yesterday. I had to drop my kids off this morning, and the trains literally just stopped at what was the station? I can't remember the station, but stopped there. Doors wouldn't open. We're sitting there for a good 10 minutes. Trains busted. My kids have school. One of them was late. And I'm watching these 5 guys who are like high schoolers. I think today they're supposed to take their PSATs. I hope they made it or whatever
Okay.
the exam is,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but they're stuck. And for a good 20 minutes, the train isn't going anywhere. And they're stressing out. And then the train's like, oh, no, we've got to go express. Now we're going express. And like stuff like that, but man, like when that happens, you're sitting there thinking, oh,
Dude, I
should I
remember
be
these.
doing this with my
I
life?
remember those days vividly, man. I remember, and then now, and then, but wait, here's another comment that you made though. You said you and your wife are four, and your kids are fortunate enough to have a 3 bedroom. Me and my wife often joke about it. When we left 83rd and Second, I was in that apartment for years, man. And when I got that apartment, that was my apartment before I met my now wife. And when she actually moved into that place with me, we joke all the time, like, can you imagine? Because she sells software full time. She does an awesome job selling software. I'm doing CXC every single day. Like, we're like, could you imagine if we were in that little 500 square foot box? Like, I'd have to be in the back of the apartment in the bathroom. She'd have to be in the front of the apartment by the windows and the entrance, just so we didn't hear each other. But it's funny, man. That's how fast the world and times can change. Mikhail, I'd love to pick your brain of tools, man. You worked at all these different businesses. You've been in all these different industries. I'd love to just hear you talk about some of the different ways that you've seen companies build tech stacks, maybe some of the really good stuff that you've seen or some of the good tools you've seen. And then I'd love for you to kind of share with our listeners some of the stuff that you saw in your career that maybe wasn't so great with either building the tech stack, making the right tech investments, or most important, because you know that I'm like maniacally focused on this lately, the
Yeah.
ideas or stories around what you saw to work for utilization. What were things that you saw companies do really well that forced their teammates to basically naturally utilize or find immediate utility for the tech stack? Or maybe
Yeah.
some of the stories where it's like, dude, we didn't use our tech stack because of. I'd love for you just spend a couple minutes kind of talk about technology and tools.
That's a great question. Man, so I'm gonna preface this by saying I'm gonna say this and then immediately contradict myself. There's no such thing as a bad tech stack.
Okay.
With that said, one of the hardest things to do is implement useful technology for your team,
Yep.
CS and
Yep.
otherwise. Just
Yep.
super difficult.
Yep.
So I've done everything from Google Sheets all the way up to doing deployments with HubSpot. They have like a service suite. And then also Gainsight, which I almost blanked on. Gainsight as a tool is really awesome. And then I've RFP'd a few others as well. Here's what I found. I have found that uh, if you are less than, let's say, 50 customers, you should not invest in technology. Sub 50, Google Sheets works well. Airtable works really well. I mentioned before the call, like I'm working contract with a company right now that they don't have a CS tech stack. They're running on Airtable. They're running on a few other things.
Yep.
They're stretching Airtable to the max,
Okay.
and so they're at a point now where they need to, and they've got a little more than 50 customers. And they're at a point now where they need to actually make an investment, think about what that needs to look like.
Yep.
What I'd say is where the tech stack works best is if the CS leader, if you have the ability to do this, is unselfish, and the sales leader is unselfish, and the marketing leader is unselfish, and the three of them can get in a room and say, "Here are all the requirements I need to run a good go-to-market business, a good commercial business," and say, "We all have our own budgets, we
Yep.
all have the things that we need, but collectively, we need to make sure that everything's talking to everything." It might be that we all run the same type of products. So we're all running on Salesforce or HubSpot. It might very well be based off the type of business that that doesn't make sense and that's not the route that you should go.
Yep.
But we all still need data from one place to the other. Like if I'm
Yep.
on CF, I still want to see data on, okay, for customer marketing, this customer is highly engaged in the product. Um, how often are they engaging with some of our other digital properties? How often are they looking at the, if there's a training sequence that I have with marketing, how often are they making their way all the way through or looking at everything? Like, I want that information. I want that data. On the sales side, if renewals are coming up, um, I want to be able to give sales very easily some information on here's what this account is like, here's what they've been like for the last year or 2 years. Where I found there to be a lot of inefficiency is when those groups aren't talking to each other, they run their own tech stack.
Yep.
And then what ends up happening inevitably is whatever team I'm running, we're spending a lot of time and hours just trying to build it, like just trying to get the answers back to the other teams that they might need,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
problematic. So
Yep.
I'd say like the best tech stack that I've seen, it's dependent and it's really come down to for stage of company, what's our budget, what's the experience of the customer that we want, and how do we organize around that. And so it's changed from company to company. Integral, we actually didn't run any software. It was
Uh,
all Google Sheets, and then we
uh,
had a proprietary dashboard where we would get these reports from SQL all the time. I didn't know any better. Eventually got to a point. So, and it wasn't like I would say this was not a good practice, but we got to the point where I had a 2 month run where I was losing camera, man, like 3 or 4 high profile customers, and they were visibly upset. And I felt like I was blind. I felt like I didn't know or couldn't see that there was a problem coming. And I got on the
yep.
phone with them and talked to them and say, "Hey, tell me what's going on. Like, what's the issue?" And what they'll inevitably say is, it was not one big issue. It was just a series of things over the last few months. And it just gave me the feeling like you didn't care about my business.
Got you.
So what I mean to do is to go out to the team and say, "Look, every team meeting, I need a red, yellow, green status on the accounts. And if we start seeing that we've got too many yellows across an account, we've got to fix it. We've got to
Yeah.
address it.
Yep.
And make sure that
100%.
we're getting in front of it, get on the phone with the customer, make sure they feel happy, double, triple, quadruple QA, anything that's going out to them. If it's a report, if it's tags, because we had to put a piece of code on their media, like just double check everything and make sure that they're super happy, and over service them as much as you can because like my thing was as a leader, right? This is my fault because I didn't have visibility to my book,
Yep.
and I was trusting that, if 1 or 2 things happen, it's okay. I eventually said, no, we need to bring in some form of data, and that was phase one. Other good implementations that I've seen. So Gainside, I have a love, I wouldn't call it love hate. Love, not really love relationship, depending. We use it at Quantcast. I don't think we used it super well. And a lot of it came down to at the time, we didn't do our homework on here's what the business actually requires,
Yep.
and here's what Gainsight can actually do.
Yeah.
Um, but the tools, man, everything that Gainsight had, I loved because I sat there like, I had to build all of this by hand because I realized we needed it. And
Yep.
it was so refreshing to see that, no, like there's other people running to the same problems and people actually built businesses that can support this and solve this. And I love the time savings. Like when it ran well, when we had it organized well and set up well, it saved me a ton of time in terms of pulling data, in terms of seeing what's going on with accounts. Instead of having a 20-minute review on, from each team member going around and telling me, here's what's going on with the accounts, I can just pull up a dashboard and see, here's my book,
Yeah.
here's everyone that's happy, Here are
Yep.
the people not so happy. Here are the people that might churn unless we do something really important. And I can't tell you how much time and efficiency that saved for me, which was really awesome. And I loved it. Where the not so excited about portion came in, and this goes back to me saying, do your homework. We, with Gainsight, um, there's just a lot of work, and it's funny, like a lot of pieces of CS software and sales software gets there at some point. I think HubSpot's getting there now too, where you just have so many offerings, it gets so complex that there's a lot of maintenance. You need like a specialist
Yeah.
or a
Yep.
consultant sometimes to step
Yep.
in and say, here's how you set it up best, here's how to keep it efficient. And there's a maintenance cost, and I don't mean financial, I mean like time and personnel to keeping that stack running really well. And you've got to be able to do that math and say, I can get this budget continuously to get the software, and I can get whatever incremental budget I need to make sure the software is doing exactly what I need it to do with my team. And that's not always on the software company. That's on the company saying, like, I know how to make a good decision about the stack, and
Yep.
I'm realistic that in today's day and age, as our company grows and we're going from a few hundred to a few thousand customers, or as this vendor grows and it's going from a few hundred to a few thousand customers and they need to be competitive, there's going to be some mismatch there that I need to address and find a way to keep the two going in sync with each other. And if it's not, all right, well, now it's time to RFP and find some other folks
Yeah. Yeah.
that can
Yeah.
maybe support business better.
I love it, man. So a couple media just points of reaction. Like, so the first thought is this, because so many companies do this wrong, man. You said something around make sure that you're taking the time to actually be thoughtful about what you need. And in the beginning of the technology part, you said, look, if you're little, you're small, don't even like just keep playing the game, figure out a bunch of plays, see how the offense works, see how midfield works, see how defense works. That makes a
As
ton
I
of sense
said,
to me. Totally agree with that. But as you progress, as you mature, as you evolve, as you scale your business, now some things change. And the simple where my brain went, hearing you kind of talk through some of the more pragmatic ways that you got to think about how you're building, managing, and then how you're making your tech stack investment. Dude, I almost think about it like a Formula One race or like a NASCAR race where like guys, every single time before a car shows up to a track, there is a pit crew, there is an engineering design crew that is thinking about how that car needs to be set up before it
yeah,
even gets to Las Vegas, right? Or before it even gets to Paris, or even before it gets to London. So, like, number one is just like know your track. And this is where for the CX and the CS nerds listening and my people, this is where we come into play. Like you start to think about how you can break down before anybody buys anything, before anybody even thinks about what the car needs to look like or what the pit crew's gonna have to look like to service that car, or to set that car up, or to maintain that car. Like know your track, know what you're even trying to accomplish. It's amazing how many companies we've worked with at CXC, Mikhail, over the last 4 years that
yeah,
even by bringing them through different user or journey mapping, or even by really forcing them to be super meticulous with thinking about every touch point. Where exactly does the touch point happen across the journey? Which teams are involved? What metrics are we counting? What types of consternation points are just constantly in the mix here around just what's happening in the business at that time? Dude, there's a ton of companies that do it the opposite. They think maybe an executive came from a last company where, oh no, Salesforce is the only way that we're going to build this company, or no. Zendesk is the only tool that can support this type of ticket volume. Okay, I've heard all this stuff too, right? And then on the communication side, there's the Twilios, there's the Ring. My point is like every one of these businesses, every one of these user or customer journeys, they are different. And then when you
yeah.
get really the right guys and gals around the table, the smart people that are going to be building or iterating or probably already understand your now customer portfolio, the things that are really happening in your world to build your business or to bring in your revenue every damn day, man, that's an easy way to start parsing out and really kind of thinking about in a pragmatic form what type of tools you need, and then shortlisting, right? A lot of the work that we do at CXC, Mikhail, is we work with customers to give them short lists of potential tech solutions based on what type of ingestion points they're giving us. So, like, what are your goals? What type of portfolio volume do you have? What type of communications volume do you have? How many different touch points or handoffs are going to be in your business or in your journey? Because, like, every one of those variables makes a huge difference in terms of what type of technology you should be thinking about. Last point, I love your point of like, dude, like make sure you guys are thinking about the maintenance and the upkeep costs. It's almost like we can go with my race car, pit crew analogy, or even I use the real estate example all the time. You're not just buying a house; you're buying a house. Then you're buying annual property taxes. You're buying annual maintenance costs. You're buying annual, just let's call contingencies where shit will blow up, shit will break, things will inevitably fall apart. So like guys, you gotta think about it all this way. Make sure that you're budgeting, planning, and really kind of getting ready to dig in all that stuff that's going to potentially hit your business. So I love it. Mikhail, I'd love to spend a minute or two on process, man. Like
Yeah.
give us an idea, like, um, has there been a way that you've kind of gone about building playbooks with your team or capturing which primary knowledge needs to eventually make its way into a knowledge base? I'd love for you to just kind of, or even metrics, man. You kind of started to get into it in the tech stack there with metrics and just understanding utilization and engagement, all these things. But like, I'd love for you to spend a minute or two talking about process.
Yeah, that's great. So, I'd say the last 5 years for me, it's been primarily focused on how do we get to product market fit, and then once we're close, what does the actual customer journey look like? So the early days, it's working really closely with the product team to figure out, okay, what are we building? What does that look like? What does it need to look like? And then how's the customer interacting with it? So it's less about in those early days, it's actually for me less about is the not so much as the customer happy. I always want them happy, but it's about how many of these customers are truly happy and they get it. And that's always step one. If you're a startup founder, like that's got to be the most important thing. Like what metrics are we looking at to figure out usage? When I start to see the usage is starting to get to a pretty good place, if you're measuring NPS, which I don't really think you need to do early, but like whatever the measurement is for you in terms of getting to a good place with product market fit. So, for example, if it's a software that you need to be and I'll give a real world example. Artemis, when I joined Artemis, we had like 30 or 40 customers at the time, my first year. And a lot of the issue for us was we were trying to take farmers who are generally not tech savvy. That's changing, but like they're not folks that are going to be behind a desktop all day. And keep in mind, I was coming from, banking, insurance, advertising, where folks are behind those laptops for like 10, 12 hours a day, married to their phones, everything. We're not going to farmers who like, I use my phone to call someone. And you're asking me now to like get behind a laptop all the time or download an app and start to do, whatever we need to do. And so for me, it was figuring out, okay, we need to get usage up, but not in the sense of they need to hit this metric so that we're happy. It's more like we need to understand where we're actually providing value. And so a lot of the analytics that we looked at was where do customers quickly get it and where don't they get it? And in those first days, it was how do I then set up training, whether it's an app, whether it's in person, to support that farmer and make sure that they fully understand everything they need to be effective. So what ended up being like the first metric for us was what we called the customer, like gosh, the customer completion rate, which was specific to training. And we were able to get good data that showed if you go 0 to 1 training, you're going to churn. Two, you're 50-50, three, or all four, and retention would sit at 90% or better. And so the goal was how do I then organize everything we're doing for marketing, for training, for onboarding to get folks to that third or fourth training as quickly as possible, as effectively as possible. And then say, hey, your homework is let's go into the system and do these things we learned and go into the app and do these things we learned so you can get comfortable with it.
I,
Once we got there,
I
I was
love
able to
that.
back it. Thanks, I appreciate it. And then once we got there, I was able to start to back in and look at the more general metrics of okay, like what are sign-ins need to look at, what does onboarding need to look for, how do we segment the enterprise folks from the mid-tier and the smaller folks,
Yep.
and then how do we support them with the smaller folks? Let's start looking more at one-to-many, and then mid-tier and enterprise. Let's start thinking about the customer journey, thinking more strategically about their business, and start thinking about what they need to plug into, which would eventually become looking more so at team utilization. So analytics around if I'm an enterprise customer, am I seeing 20, 30% utilization, 50% utilization in
Yep.
terms of the folks with a seat actually using it and starting to splice out how much do those different profiles love what we're building. And that for me was super important. I took that learning and applied it to everywhere else where it always came down to what are we trying to do? Who's the customer? Like, what's their profile? And how often do we want them in the tech?
Yep.
And everything else around it would be informed by those three questions so that we can make sure we're building the right systems, the right plan to get the team to where they needed to get to.
Love it, man. That first part that you just said, man, every one of our listeners should hit stop right now, go back and rewind 60 seconds because like basically it's amazing on the SaaS side, man, and on the technology side, how many companies they'll spend millions of dollars building these tools, these platforms, these apps. And then they'll say, well, we're not going to be able to force every single one of our customers into an onboarding call or into a training demo. So you gotta let customers do their own thing. Okay, I feel you. I understand. Path of least resistance, totally got you. I know. And this shit's hard. Selling is freaking hard. Getting customers to adopt something is even harder. Getting customers to buy something, forget about it. There's very few of us on planet Earth that even know how to do that shit. That's a totally different ballgame. But what you just said about, I bet you most companies, Mikhail, especially SaaS companies, technology companies, they probably have pretty damn close conversion to what you just laid out. Zero trainings, zero chance. One training, maybe there's a possibility if they see value on a 30-minute training. Two out of two, or two trainings plus. All right, now we're getting somewhere. That's probably going to be an engaged account that I'm going to even think about spending some of my CS or my onboarding resources towards, because I have a higher probability of flipping them or converting them or
Yeah.
increasing velocity of engagement. 3 out of 4 or 4 out of 4, bing, bing, bing. Those are going to be tomorrow's green customers, fully utilized, understand adoption, understand usage. They probably become promoters, especially because if they're getting through that, then they actually see full utility of the product, the service, whatever we're selling them. And then lastly, engagement. Just show me another place in your life where you can have zero engagement and say that that person or that thing or that team is like a huge part of that's impossible. Engagement is required to understand how
100%.
you can begin to see a reflection of potential value, whether it's a value of a relationship, value of a product value. So I love that you're kind of thinking about that. And guys, if you haven't done this already, I mean, I know many of us CS leaders are thinking about engagement, utilization. We're looking at usage rates. We're thinking about all these things. That's great. But there's a lot of companies out there, Mikhail, that aren't even thinking about it, brother, or they don't have an expectation in onboarding of what the minimum is. And that's what's always fascinating to me is like some of these same executive teams are willing to fucking blow millions of dollars on customer acquisition without actually understanding some of the slicing and the dicing. Sorry, last part that you just said, know where to drop these people into different segments, different personas or segments. Why are you
Yeah.
spending millions of dollars in customer acquisition if you're not doing some of those simple things of understanding who's showing signals of engagement? And then from engagement, you begin to learn things about a business or about a cohort of users to where then you can actually begin to segment things. And then if you segment things, again, now you know where to place your bets. Now you know where you should double down on things and where you maybe claw back the resources or claw back the budget altogether for things that you already know are going to yield to a goose egg, right? So I love those ideas. Mikhail, I'd love to jump into the fourth and final pillar of feedback. Spend a minute
Yeah.
or two kind of talking about some of the things that you've done across your career to really kind of think about how you can collect and act upon customer feedback, and then maybe share an example around how you've done the same type of thing with your teams and your employee, and give us some ideas
Yeah.
for employee feedback.
No, that's a great question. Customer feedback. So I always try to do one of two things. I think if there's a certain dollar amount and that changes by industry, you owe it to the customer to at least, especially in those early days, soon after onboarding, at least have 2 or 3 status calls. So depending on size, I might say, hey, look, every 2 weeks for the next month and a half, 2 months, let's just check in. I want to make sure you're doing really well. I want to make sure that you understand exactly how everything works. If there's a problem, I want to surface that as quickly as possible for you. And a lot of what I'm doing in that early stage is two things. I know, and especially like anyone that's done any kind of enterprise engagement before, we'll see the same thing, whether you're on the sales or the CS side. If you do a customer visit for the next few days afterwards, you're going to get the best engagement. Folks will be in there, they're motivated, they're excited, and then life takes over and you start to see a dip.
Yeah,
Same thing to a certain degree with the status call. So if I know like I just bought something, I just saw the team or met with the team, I'm up and going. I'm excited. I want to ride that as long as possible, extend it as
yeah,
long as possible until I know that that person gets it.
yep,
If there's a certain dollar, like, it could be 20, it used to be like 20, 30,000. These days it's more like 50K. I think technology's gotten to a place where you don't need to do it as much.
yeah,
Um, once you hit that threshold, for me, it's let's start to get that feedback because I know that that user is in there a lot. I know that inevitably they're going to run into things, and that'll give me feedback on is this like an actual problem? I don't mean like bug, could be bugs too, but like, is this an actual problem with the training that we need to address? Is this a problem with the product itself? And so
yep,
I need to maybe write a ticket, send that back to product. Or is this something in between where this maybe we think this is the right customer profile, but maybe it's someone else. We think it's this buyer and these other people are going to love it, but maybe we're wrong on that assumption, or maybe it's
yep,
changing because something in the industry or the company's changing, and we need to account for that. So I was trying to get that as much as possible and get that feedback from them in the early days, and then afterwards, either we'll scale back if there's a big enough customer, there's a status call involved. We'll scale back the status calls. If there isn't something like that in place, then a lot of what I'm doing is I'm looking at as frequently as possible what are the different opportunities, and this is true for big and small customers, in app and the platform and the website to get feedback and any form of customer marketing. I always try to make sure that as much as possible, there's different avenues where people can ask questions, they can get answers. I am a huge fan of just promoting the help center or the help as much as possible, like, any kind of a Q&A or FAQ section for the website where folks can get answers to their problems to themselves.
Yep.
I'm a huge fan of it because I know if they don't find the article and they're engaged, they're going to tell us exactly what we need to be addressing, we're talking about, and then the CS team will need to go back and fix that.
Big time.
So promote that as much as possible. The marketer in me just knows I don't need it until I need it, and so I might ignore it until there's a problem. And what I
100%.
want is it to be super easy for that customer to know if there's a problem, how to get in touch with us,
Yep.
and to do that quickly. On the team side, I'm a huge fan of quick feedback. There's nothing more frustrating for me. I've been here twice where I hear everything's great, 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 and then come time for or my annual review, and like you did this one thing wrong
Yeah.
6 months ago,
Yeah.
and I'm like, why didn't you bring it up 6 months ago?
Yep.
Um, which is a frustration. There might be political reasons for it. There could be other stuff. I
Definitely.
personally don't care, but as a leader, I made it a point that, and I tell people this: when you work for me, you will get quick feedback. You should not be surprised to come a biannual or an annual review with the feedback I give you because I'll have said that to you frequently. I tell them I owe this to you as a leader
Yep.
to make sure that you have this information. What
Yep.
I'll also do is I'll say, look, I also owe it to you to have a really great experience, to build a healthy relationship. We're not here to be friends, but we really don't need to be enemies. We need to have like a good understanding of how we work. We need to have good mutual understanding, mutual respect for each other. So it doesn't mean we're gonna go out for drinks every Friday,
Yeah.
but what
Yeah.
it is, I want you to feel like I'm on your side. And
Yep.
so everything I do is to focus on making you or the company better. And something that I don't express to them, I express it to new leaders and say this is important, but I internally know and try to address is if someone above me comes down, which is less these days, but if someone comes down with me with a hammer, I need to hand whoever's on my team a feather. They should not feel the pressure that I feel because it's my job as the leader to a degree shield them, give them the good feedback.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But if undue unfair pressure, so a good example, like I'll actually give you a really great example. Quadcast, they had hired a lot of really, really new people on their CS team when they hired me. And so you have these really new, inexperienced folks dealing with sellers 20 plus years in the industry. And what was happening was the morale of the CS team was super low because they just felt frustrated. They didn't know what they're supposed to do, didn't know what they could or couldn't do. And you have all these folks who are like in their 40s, some in their 50s, who are just coming down super hard on them because they're not getting what they need. Now, to be fair to the seller, I just closed half like a $50,000 deal, $100,000 deal, potentially a $500,000 deal, and we can't support this business. Why?
Yep.
And that's a fair assessment. On the other side, the CS team, I don't care the size of the deal. You haven't given me the tools, the training, the support I need to be successful. So what I had to do when I stepped in is I like this was very obvious. I stepped in and just said, look, I hear you. I will create more of a custom plan for each one of you sellers. Not something I like to do, but I will do this because I know you owe it to the customer to give them a great experience.
Yep.
But what you cannot do is talk to my team any way you like
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
new.
Yeah.
And I to my team to train them. And what I want is we need to be able to not so much like meet in the middle, but I needed to give them time to grow into the role, to understand our systems, understand our tech, our software, reporting, everything else, understand the customer, and then move into the role and grow to the role that way. And I also need, like, when I hire my next 2 or 3 hires, needs to be someone fairly senior
Yep.
because, like, if you remember what I talked about before, like they were just out of balance. But for me, what's important is I will make sure that the CS team gets the feedback when they screw up. I'll make sure that if the seller's not happy, they're going to know the seller's not happy. But what I'm not going to do is that pressure that they're putting on them because of a deal or because you need to hit some like revenue target. That's not on them.
Yep.
That's on the seller, that's also now on me as the leader to address and make sure
Yep.
that there is a solution for that.
Yep.
But the team can't feel that. I find that a lot of times when you put that pressure on the team, or like individually on a person, realistically, most of them are not as new, not as experienced, not as able to handle the capacity, the pressure that I might be able to have. Some can, but
Yeah.
most can.
Yeah.
And me doing that is not going to get the best out of them.
Yep. I love
They're
it.
just going to sit there, they're going to crumble.
Yeah.
And so hit me with the hammer as much as you like, as frequently as possible. I'll hand that team the feather and say, here's the feedback. And again, when they screw up, they get it. But my goal is they don't feel that pressure until I feel like they're in a place where they can actually handle it. And if they can, it's because they just got promoted. They are being given bigger books, more complex books. And I know that a person has proven to me over time that they're capable of dealing with that pressure in a healthy way
Yep.
and still delivering results and not crumbling.
I love it, man. That's fantastic. It's such a good way of thinking about it. And then you're right. One of the hardest parts about being a customer focused business leader is being able to shield, protect, and lead the customer
Yeah,
facing team. Because the reality is, those oftentimes are the guys and gals going into battle. They're the first people running into the oncoming army of customers, right? And it's man, it's easy to go and to bash some of those folks because they are on the front line.
yeah,
They're on the front line. They are the ones doing the work. They're the ones swinging the sword. They're the ones pushing the message, pushing the product, the service. So like, be very, very thankful and be very, very grateful for some of that work that they're doing, right? And that
your
takes every
CS for that.
leader a heart. That's every leader's got a different sort of trail towards figuring out how they get to that place in their own life. So, Mikhail, this has been absolutely fantastic, man. Before I let you go, where can people in the CX Nation find more about you, sir? Where can they get in touch with you if they want to reach out and start their own conversation with you, sir?
Yeah, for sure. They can either email me. I will drop my email here in the chat so that you can share with your folks, or they can find me on LinkedIn and just say, "Hey, I heard you. There we go. Heard
Perfect.
your podcast on CX Chronicles and loved it." Those are the two best ways to get in touch with me, and I'd be happy to connect with any and everyone. I love this community, and I love being able to help other businesses work through a lot of these problems.
I love it. Well, Mikhail Hutton, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. I'm going to be looking forward to seeing some of the work that you do moving forward, and certainly keeping in touch, my friend. Thank you so much for
Appreciate
joining
it,
me.
man. Take care.